So I want to talk to you guys some more about Josh Duggar. It has now been revealed what he was arrested for. He was arrested because he was possessing child pornography, and he had video material showing the sexual abuse of children. So this is the reason why uh, he can't get out on bail. And this is why I said last night that whatever this guy did, it had to have been pretty bad. And indeed, it was very, very bad. He is not allowed to have visitation rights to see his 6 children, understandably so. And it really goes to show that this guy never left his pedophilia. He has never changed. When he was 15, he was sexually molesting his very young sisters and other girls. His victims were as young as 5 years old, 9 years old. And here he is, a grown man, looking at child pornography. I am not surprised at all by this. I've known about the rottenness, the rotten reality of the Duggar cult since 2014. I actually didn't really know anything about the Duggars before then. It wasn't until, believe it or not, I was dating this girl for a while, and I was courting and dating this girl, and she was absolutely fascinated with the Duggars, and she thought that the Duggars were great. And I eventually broke off that relationship. But one day I was watching television and the Duggars popped up. And I'm like, oh, those are the Duggars. They look like a bunch of psychos. Jim Bob, the father, he's problematic. The mother, she looks like a psychopath. And then you look at that son, Josh Duggar, and he always looked like a scoundrel and a weasel. And when Josh Duggar was found out to be a molester, it was actually revealed in a police report. There was a police report on Josh Duggar stating that he was molesting very young girls. And when Jim Bob Duggar found out, Jim Bob Duggar simply had his son speak with, they call him a state trooper. I guess that's a police officer. But anyway, this officer spoke with Mr. Duggar, and nothing happened. In fact, the local judge in that area of Arkansas ordered that the police report be destroyed. So the Duggar family is obviously quite well connected in that area of Arkansas, whichever area they were living in at the time. They were obviously very well connected. I mean, this is a family that at one point in time was close to Huckabee and close to a lot of the conservative American world. They were highly, highly revered and respected in the homeschooling world. And I remember, but it's interesting. Before I forget, the officer who spoke with Josh Duggar, he ended up getting arrested and found guilty of possessing child pornography. And I think he was sentenced to like 56 years in prison. So Josh Duggar, here he is getting arrested for the same thing. So none of this is really surprising. In fact, when I first began to expose the Duggar cult and the fact that they are connected with the Bill Gothard cult, and Bill Gothard was known as a predator. He's still known as a predator, and he was preying on very young girls. When I began to expose all of these things, and this was before Josh Duggar was revealed to have been a what was revealed to have been a molester in his teenage life. There were people attacking me, lots and lots of so-called conservatives, evangelicals, American Christians, whatever. They were attacking me, and they were saying, "How dare you attack this wonderful family of God?" And my contention was that evil comes in different forms and it comes in different presentations. At times, evil can present itself as an anti racist movement, and you have the Afrocentric activist with the fist of revolution up, and they're talking about fighting against racism and oppression. And that may be deceptive to certain people. To certain people, that may seem to be something very good and very persuasive, and that may convince them or persuade them to join that cause because they uh, firmly believe that the American government is just after black folks, and so they will join these sorts of movements. And that's one form of deception. You may have a group of people who claim that they are for white Christians, and they will say, well, look at the attacks on white Christians and white conservative, straight Christian families. Follow me. And you will have American rightists and conservatives say to themselves, well, this group seems like a very just group because they are fighting for the cause of us. And they may have good intentions in following these sorts of groups because they may truly and sincerely believe that there is a war on white Christians. Evil may come in the form of European neo-pagans. Well, we have to bring back the traditions because, there's a conspiracy to destroy all Western European and European traditions in general. And people will fall for those things. And the reason why they fall for those sorts of things is because they really believe, they have this internal conviction that is the truth. And the reason why people may be convinced by these things, I think, comes down to probably emotional issues. They perhaps they were neglected as children. They feel like they need somewhere to belong. So they find identity in that sort of thing. And you can say the same thing about Afrocentric groups or La Raza or et cetera, et cetera. We as humans, we have identities and we have different layers to our being. And I've said this before, we have bodies, we have spirits, consciences, we have conscience, and we also have a soul. Each one of us has a spirit, a soul, and a body. We have different layers to ourselves, and so we're multidimensional. And in this multidimensional being, we're looking for an identity. And I know I'm getting a little bit, psychological here, but I think this is the truth. We're looking for that identity. We're trying to find out who we are. How fearful are we? How courageous are we? Who are we really? And so people turn to cults and people turn to different religious groups. And some religious groups are very, very helpful and very, very good. Christian groups will get people out of drugs and get people out of alcoholism. Christian groups can make people more peaceful. Christian groups, Christian movements, and organizations and teachings will get people to realize that this life isn't just their bodies, that this life transcends the body, and it's about pursuing a spiritual life. But then they are religious groups that can be very, very dangerous and very destructive. Today I saw a documentary. It was on a homeschooling cult. And we are talking about the Duggar cult. So why not talk about a homeschooling cult? I'm speaking of the David and Louise Turpin homeschooling cult. David and Louise Turpin, they were a couple that had, I want to say, 13 children. They had a lot of kids. They had over a dozen kids. They were like the Duggars. And all the kids had matching clothes. They all had the same type of pants, the same type of shirts. They would wear matching colors. They looked like something from North Korea. And the couple would have these. There's this one video where they're doing this weird wedding ceremony where you have a guy who looks like Elvis and they're in Vegas. It looks like something that you would see in maybe Kazakhstan or North Korea. It's very, very cultic. Now, initially, this couple, they were Pentecostal, and they began homeschooling. And I assume that when they initially began homeschooling, they did so on some idea of Christianity, as corrupt and as warped as it was. It was some idea of Christianity, some horrific, heretical form of Christianity. But then the wife and the husband, they began to get involved in gambling, heavy alcoholism, and they also started getting into something really twisted. I'm talking about cuckery. The husband liked the idea of his wife sleeping with other men, and they did this sort of depravity. So this couple was obviously very depraved. They were treating their children. They were treating their children like they were members of a military. They were, but actually worse than a military. It was a house of torture, really. They wanted to live in a lot of land, so they actually went to Texas and they bought some land and they got a house on the land. And in Texas, a lot of people in Texas, they like to live with lots of open space in between their neighbors. So that's what this family wanted. They wanted that space, and I think they did so because they wanted secretiveness. They wanted to be secretive. But the neighbors were very suspicious of them. And there was one couple that lived nearby that always found them to be very strange. One of the daughters tried to escape. I think she was maybe 16 or 17 years old, and she tried to escape, and she ran out of the house, and she just kept on running. She just kept on running, and eventually she hit the street. And the first car that she sees, she starts screaming, "Help, help." But because she was so isolated and so tormented and tortured, she actually never learned how to speak fluently. She never really learned how to speak properly. So when she spoke, even though she was 17 or 16 years old, even though she was at that age range, she would speak like a small child. And so the driver, hearing her talk, automatically assumed that she was mentally handicapped. And so she was driven back home. Very, very sad. And then once that happened, of course, the abuse got much worse. Eventually, this family moved out of the house and they went to California. Now, the Texas neighbor, they were always suspicious of the Turpin family. And the husband said, I want to check out what was going on in this house. So he went into the house after they moved. And the refrigerator was still there. The bunk beds were still there. And he said that the fridge was locked by a chain and a lock, by a padlock. The cabinets were padlocked. The bunk beds had chains around them. It was absolutely horrifying. These kids were allowed to only eat once a day. And the fridge was locked to prevent the kids from just going to the fridge and getting something to eat. This is horrific. One of the most horrifying stories I've actually ever read. And I've read some pretty horrifying stuff. Then they moved to California because I think the Texan neighbors weren't liking them too much. So they moved to California and they moved into this suburb where the homes are very close to each other. And the next door neighbor saw from the top floor of his house, he saw this family on their upper floor marching in a circle. It was just creepy, just marching in a circle. He was watching from his window, this family marching in a circle. It was really, really creepy. Now, a lot of people would assume, well, this was some Christian, crazy Christian cult. But the sister of Louise Turpin spoke with her sister on the phone, and Louise Turpin told her sister, I don't even believe in Christianity. I left the church a long time ago, and actually I'm involved in witchcraft. And Louise Turpin's sister actually was going through actually had gone through a divorce. And Louise Turpin said, I can give you a spell to bring him back. So she was getting involved in witchcraft, and she was obsessing over books on Satanism. So this was a satanic couple that was tormenting their children as part of some demonic, diabolical, sinister agenda. It was really horrific stuff. And both of the parents got life in prison. But again, I have read numerous horrific stories on homeschooling cults. There was one story that I had read years ago when I was studying these things. Oh my God, I get a little bit stressed when I think about these things. In all honesty, not just for the horror of the horrible reality of it, but also because it's happening in my country. This isn't happening in Afghanistan. This is happening in our country. And a lot of these families are the types of families that appear to be perfect. They appear to be clean and Christian and conservative and educated. But behind closed doors, they're monsters. They're absolute monsters. And these people are your neighbors. They are in your churches. They're in your schools. And it's difficult to tell who they are. At times it can be difficult to tell who they are. But they are red flags that we may see and we may have a suspicion over. But many times we're too scared to do something, or we're too scared to appear paranoid, or we don't want to get involved in other people's business. But we ignore our red flags. And there was one story that I had read where there was a family that appeared conservative, and they had the homeschooling thing going on, and the father had the daughter in a cage, and he was ripping the flesh from her body using tools, using construction tools as means of torture on his own daughter. And I think by the time they found the daughter, she was in a horrific condition. And the social workers tried to get her to bathe, and she didn't even know how a shower worked. It was horrific. Absolutely horrific. And I remember, man, you see, this is one of the things that really got me to be disillusioned about the traditional Catholic movement, because I hung out with a lot of traditional Catholics, not just on the internet, but in real life. Because I would go to the Catholic church, and I went to mass, and I would meet traditional Catholics. And I liked them in the beginning because I liked what they had to say, and I liked what their convictions were. But getting to know them further, there were some things that made me feel unsettled. And I remember one time I was in this church, and after the mass, I had met this family. Clean, white, traditional Catholic family. A lot of conservative Christians would look at this family and think, oh, wow, they're so orderly, they're so clean, they're so kind, they're so polite, they're so Christian, so conservative. And that is what I thought when I had first met this family. And then one day I was talking with some of the members of this family, I saw the daughter. They had a daughter, and I think she was maybe 17 or 18 years old. But she never talked. And I remember I was talking to two of her brothers, and the sister was right there. And I asked one of the brothers, "What grade are you in?" Again, these kids are homeschooled. I said, "What grade are you in?" And I think he told me that he was in the seventh grade, or something like that. And then I looked at the daughter, the sister, and I said, "What grade are you in?" And I am not exaggerating when I say this. She looked at me like this. And I said, "What grade are you in?" And I said, maybe she's not hearing me right. "What grade are you in?" And she starts shaking her head like this. And I still think about it to this day. And it gives me goosebumps. You know why it gives me goosebumps? Because I looked at the brothers and I said, "What's wrong with her?" And one of them told me she doesn't go to school. And I look back at that and I feel, in a way, guilty because I didn't say something. I didn't report something because those were signs of abuse. The way that the girl looked, the way that she shook her head, how quiet she was, the fact that they said she doesn't go to school even though she was like 17, 16 years old, maybe even a little older than that. All that put together, it was a sign of abuse. It was a sign of neglect. It was a sign of something bad. And I should have done something about that. I should have done something about that. I should have said something. But that was a homeschooling family. And it just freaked me out. It really did. And I remember years ago I met a girl who was homeschooled, and she was not Catholic, she was Protestant. And we would talk maybe every week or so, and she had told me that her mother was a Calvinist. And I said that I don't really agree with the idea of predestination. So the next time we had a conversation, she says to me, "My mother says that I'm not allowed to talk to you anymore." And I said, "Why not?" And she said, "Because you don't believe in the 5 points of Calvinism." So I've had some strange experiences with homeschooling families. There was this one family that I used to see at the church I used to go to. I had never spoken with this family, but I used to see them. And they were a very large family. They would dress up as if they were Mormons in a compound. It was very strange. They had all the signs of a cult. One thing that I noticed about them is that anytime the church had a potluck dinner, they would not only eat exorbitant amounts of food, they would not only eat excessive amounts of food, but they would also take tr- tremendous amounts of the food with them to take back home. And they would eat almost everything. And I didn't really care because that food was garbage. I actually can't stand potluck dinners. I think there's something about them that just grosses me out. Just like the foil on the trays and the plastic, and then everyone sharing out of the gross. It's just, I don't like it. But anyway, that was a sign of some kind of abuse. Why are you taking so much food home? Don't you have food of your own? And just seeing things like that. At that time, I just thought that these people were trash. I thought that they were just low class. That's what I thought. But I look back and I think, I should have said something. I should have inquired more. I should have done something, but I didn't. There's a lot of strange things with homeschoolers. One thing that I've noticed also about them, and of course, this doesn't fit all of them, but it's fit all of the ones that I have met. They seem to be very arrogant. There is an arrogance to them. And I don't know if it's because they think that they're super intelligent because they're homeschooled. They think that they're more intelligent than people who went to public education. I don't know. But when I speak to them, there is an arrogance that is just so strongly exuded from them. They exude this very, very obvious arrogance. And I saw it one time, I saw it another time, I saw it a third time, fourth time, fifth time, sixth time, seventh time, eighth time. I've seen it so many times in the homeschoolers that I've met. And I've met a good amount of them. And it's just it comes to the point where it's too consistent to ignore, and it's no longer surprising. It's literally a pattern of behavior with them. So there's a lot of dysfunction in the homeschooling world. And so, yeah, the Josh Duggar story doesn't surprise me at all. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the homeschooling community. I'm sure they are very, very fine people who are homeschooled. But at the same time, I've noticed so much weirdness that I can't ignore that. There are Muslim people out there who are great humans. They are great people. But at the same time, there are a lot of Muslim people out there who are very dangerous. And it's just a pattern of behavior that you can't ignore. Anyway, you guys just heard some theology. God bless.